You know, for decades, one of the most popular, most anticipated lectures at MIT wasn't about artificial intelligence or robotics. Nope, it was about something way more fundamental: how to speak. So today, we're going to break down the incredible wisdom of the late, great Professor Patrick Winston. We're going to distill it into a guide that's powerful, actionable, and can totally transform how you get your ideas across. All right, let's get into it.
Now this right here was Winston's core belief. And you got to admit, it's pretty radical. Just look at the order he puts them in. It's not just about having brilliant ideas, it's about whether you can communicate them. He was convinced that speaking well is the single biggest multiplier for your success in anything you do. And that idea, that's the foundation for everything we're about to cover.
So, if you're someone who thinks, oh, great speakers are just born that way, well, Winston had this little formula that might just change your mind. He believed that speaking is a skill, plain and simple. It's built on knowledge and practice, and that natural talent, that's a tiny, tiny piece of the puzzle. This explainer is all about giving you that crucial knowledge part, the toolkit you need to start practicing the right way.
So let's kick things off right where Winston always did, with the why. Because before you can even get into the techniques, you really have to buy into this idea that your ability to communicate clearly is the absolute bedrock of, well, pretty much everything you want to achieve professionally and even personally.
You know that classic advice, start with a joke. Forget it. Winston said that's one of the worst things you can do, because the audience is still getting settled, they're not ready for it. Instead, he said you should start with what he called an empowerment promise. It's a clear, confident statement about the value you're about to deliver. It's like a contract with your audience that says, stick with me, and here's what you'll get. It grabs their attention right away.
Okay, so once you've hooked your audience, you've got to deliver the goods, right? This next part is all about 4 of Winston's most powerful little tricks for making sure that the core of your presentation, your actual ideas, are not just heard, but are truly understood and, most importantly, remembered.
So here they are, the big 4. First up, cycle on your topic. That just means you repeat your key ideas, but in different ways, to make sure it sinks in for everyone. Second is build a fence, and we're going to dig into that one in just a second because it's brilliant. Third, use verbal punctuation. These are little signposts like, the first thing you need to know is, or now for the most important part. It gives your talk structure. And fourth, ask a question. It's the perfect way to reel an audience back in if you feel their attention drifting. But let's really focus on number 2, building a fence.
Okay, so what in the world does he mean by building a fence? It's this. To make an idea crystal clear, don't just explain what it is. You have to be just as clear about what it is not. By showing examples that are super close but not quite right, what Winston called near misses, you create a really sharp boundary around your concept. It's like you're building a fence that stops your idea from getting mixed up with anyone else's. All right, let's move on to the practical tools of the trade. We're going to zoom in on the one that is the most common and, let's be honest, the one that is most often abused, the presentation slide. According to Winston, this is the cardinal sin of making slides. It's a total crime. See, he reminded his students that we humans only have one language processor in our brains. That means your audience can either read what's on your slide or they can listen to you speak. They literally cannot do both at the same time. So when you throw a giant wall of text up there, you're forcing them to read and you just become background noise.
And here we have it, Exhibit A of the crime in action. This is just a terrible slide. It's got all the classic mistakes, right? The distracting background, a totally pointless logo, and of course, that huge block of text. This forces that awful tennis match where your audience's heads are just whipping back and forth between you and the screen. And you know what they remember in the end? Almost nothing.
So, how do we fix this mess? Winston's process is simple, but you have to be ruthless. First, get rid of all the junk. The noisy background, the extra graphics, gone. Then you slash the word count. Be brutal. Get it down to the absolute bare minimum. And finally, kill the logos in the title. Seriously, you can say the title of the slide. You don't need to waste precious space on it. The goal here is radical simplification.
And voila! Here's what you're left with. Just the core idea. The slide is now the simple, elegant little accent to what you, the speaker, are saying. It supports your message, it doesn't fight with it for attention. So the big takeaway here is this: your slides are the condiments. You are the main course.
Okay, we've talked about how to start a presentation with that empowerment promise. Now let's talk about the other critical bookend,
the finish. These are the moments that really stick in an audience's mind, and Winston had some very, very specific advice on how not to waste them.
So first, what not to do. These right here are some of the absolute worst final slides you could possibly use. A long list of names just diffuses your own personal contribution. And those thank you or question slides, they're just empty placeholders. They waste the single most valuable piece of real estate in your entire talk. Never, ever end on an empty slide.
So what should you do instead? Winston was passionate about this. He insisted that your final slide, the one that's going to stay up on screen during the whole Q&A session, should be this: a simple, clear, confident list of your key contributions. It reinforces exactly what you accomplished and makes sure that your achievements are the very last thing that the audience is looking at and thinking about.
And what about the very last words that come out of your mouth? Winston argued that just saying thank you is actually a pretty weak move. It kind of implies that the audience only stuck around to be polite. He said a much stronger way to finish is to salute the audience. Say something genuine, something like, "It's been fantastic being here with you all, and I've really been stimulated by your questions." It creates this feeling of mutual respect, like your partners.
So, you've delivered your ideas with clarity. You've ended with a bang. What's the final piece of the puzzle? It's making sure that those great ideas actually stick around long after you've left the room. And of course, Winston had a framework for that too, a framework for making your ideas famous.
He called it Winston's Star. And he argued that for an idea to become truly memorable and spread, it needs 5 things. It needs a visual symbol that people can actually picture in their heads. It needs a catchy slogan that acts as a handle for the idea. It needs an element of surprise to make it feel new. It needs one single salient idea that stands out above all the rest. And finally, you have to wrap all of that up in a compelling story. If you can hit all 5 of these points, your idea has a much, much better chance of being remembered and shared.
And that pretty much brings us to the end. All these principles from Patrick Winston's legendary lecture, they're not really just about giving a better presentation. They're about giving your own ideas the platform and the voice they truly deserve. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what is your most important idea, and how are you going to use these tools to make sure the world hears it?